every moment, uh, think is, it's a man destructive becomes distant. Your first instinct is probably not to protect your heart. It's to search for answers. You'll replay his last message. You wonder if you said something wrong. Remember the way he smiled only days ago and ask yourself how someone can feel so close one moment, calm so far away the next, and without even noticing it, your entire emotional world begins to orbit around one question: what changed? But that question quietly steals something far more valuable than the relationship itself. It steals your center. Because while you're trying to understand his silence, you're slowly becoming silent toward yourself. The strange part is, the moment you start chasing clarity, you often lose the very quality that made you unforgettable in the first place. Not because you loved too much, not because you cared too deeply, but because fear has a way of making even the strongest heart forget its own worth. And what if the moment he pulls away isn't the moment your value disappears? What if it's the moment your real value has the chance to appear for the first time? Most women never hear that. They hear advice about texting less, waiting 3 days, acting mysterious, pretending not to care. But none of those things create real value, because value is never something you perform, it's something you protect. And once you understand the difference, you'll never experience distance the same way again. Have you ever noticed how quickly one person's silence can become louder than your own thoughts? It starts innocently. You wake up expecting a message that doesn't come. Hours pass, then a full day. You tell yourself he's probably busy. Then you wonder if he's losing interest. Then another thought arrives. Maybe he's talking to someone else. Maybe you imagined the connection. Maybe you expected too much. Your mind begins building stories from empty spaces, not because you're irrational, because uncertainty is uncomfortable. The human mind would rather believe a painful story than sit inside an unanswered question. That is why silence feels so powerful. Silence gives your imagination unlimited freedom. And unfortunately, your imagination rarely chooses peace. It usually chooses fear. You begin remembering every tiny mistake, every conversation, every pause, every sentence that suddenly feels suspicious. You become a detective, investigating a crime that may never have happened. Meanwhile, life continues moving. Friends laugh around you. Work still demands your attention. The sun still rises, yet inside your heart everything feels frozen. It's almost as if someone you've known for only a short time has quietly taken control of your emotional weather. A simple notification can lift your mood. Its absence can ruin your entire evening. That isn't love. It's emotional dependence beginning to grow. The difficult part is that it doesn't announce itself. It disguises itself as hope. It whispers, "I just need reassurance. I just want to know where we stand. I only need one honest conversation." Those sound reasonable, sometimes they are. But if your peace depends entirely on another person's response, something deeper is happening. Something that has very little to do with him. Because the pain isn't only about his distance, it's about what his distance awakens inside you. Maybe it awakens an old fear of not being chosen. Maybe it reminds you of someone who left years ago without explanation. Maybe it touches the little girl who learned that love could disappear without warning. Most emotional pain isn't born today. Today simply gives it another voice. That's why two women can experience the exact same situation and respond in completely different ways. One notices the distance and calmly gives space. The other feels like her entire world is collapsing. The event is identical, the meaning is not. One experiences silence, the other experiences abandonment. And those are two very different realities. Here's what almost nobody realizes. The fear of losing someone can become stronger than the desire to truly know them. Read that again inside your own heart. Because when fear takes over, curiosity disappears. You stop asking, is this relationship healthy for me? Instead, you ask, how do I keep him? Those questions lead to completely different lives. One protects your dignity, the other slowly negotiates it away. Imagine a woman named Claire. She meets someone who feels different. He listens carefully, he remembers little details, he makes her laugh in ways she hasn't laughed for years. For the first time in a long time, she allows herself to hope. Weeks pass, everything feels natural. Then little things begin changing. His replies become shorter. Plans become uncertain. Phone calls happen less often. Nothing dramatic, just enough to create confusion. Claire tells herself not to overreact, but her mind becomes louder each day. She starts checking when he was last online. She rereads old conversations, searching for hidden meaning. She changes her schedule, just in case he reaches out. She stops enjoying the things she once loved, because every quiet moment becomes another opportunity to think about him. Notice something important. His behavior has changed only slightly, but her entire identity has started revolving around his attention. Without realizing it, she has placed him at the center of a life that used to belong to her. And this is where many women believe the answer is to become more attractive, lose weight, dress differently, say less, smile more, become easier, become harder, become whatever they imagine will make him stay. But the strange part is, people are rarely drawn towards someone who has abandoned themselves. Real attraction doesn't grow from self-pleasure. It grows from emotional stability. There is something deeply calming about a person who refuses to panic every time life becomes uncertain. Think about the people you've admired most. Maybe it wasn't their beauty, maybe it wasn't their success. Maybe it was the quiet feeling they carried, the feeling that they belonged to themselves, no matter what happened around them. That kind of presence cannot be faked, because it isn't created by confidence alone. It's created by self-trust. And self-trust is built in moments exactly like these, not when everything feels secure, but when everything feels uncertain. Anyone can feel confident while receiving constant attention. The real question is, who are you when attention disappears? Do you disappear with it, or do you remain deeply connected to yourself? That answer quietly shapes every relationship you'll ever have. Something even more surprising happens when someone pulls away. Your brain begins confusing action with control. Doing something feels safer than doing nothing. So you text again, then you send another message to clarify your feelings, then maybe one more to make sure there wasn't a misunderstanding. None of these actions come from peace. They come from anxiety trying to escape itself. An anxious mind believes movement creates safety. But emotional safety rarely comes from chasing. Sometimes it comes from standing still long enough to hear what reality is trying to tell you. Because distance reveals things that closeness often hides. When someone is always present, it's easy to project your hopes onto them. You imagine who they could become. You focus on potential. You overlook inconsistencies. But space removes the fog. Patterns become visible. You notice whether effort still exists when excitement fades. You notice whether communication remains respectful without constant reminders. You notice whether care survives inconvenience. Distance does always destroy relationships. Sometimes it simply exposes them. That can feel heartbreaking. But exposure is not your enemy. Illusion is. Have you ever watched the tide pull away from the shore? At first it looks like something beautiful is leaving. The water retreats. The shoreline feels empty. But then something remarkable happens. Rocks hidden beneath the surface begin to appear. Tiny shells, pieces of sea glass, things that were always there but invisible beneath the water. Emotional distance works the same way. When someone's attention pulls back, hidden truths begin appearing. Not only about them, about you, you discover where your fears live. You discover what you believe you deserve. You discover how quickly you abandon yourself to avoid being abandoned by someone else. Those discoveries are painful, but they are priceless, because you cannot heal what remains hidden. Many women spend years believing they need to become more lovable. They read books, watch videos, analyze every relationship. They become experts at understanding everyone except themselves. Yet the greatest transformation begins with one uncomfortable question. What am I believing about myself right now? Not about him, about you. Are you believing that silence means you're not enough? Are you believing that someone's uncertainty defines your worth? Are you believing love must always be earned? Those beliefs quietly influence every message you send, every conversation you have, every boundary you ignore, every apology you make for simply existing. And beliefs don't need to be spoken aloud to shape your life. They whisper beneath every decision. A woman who secretly believes she isn't enough often gives far more than she receives, not because she's generous, because she's negotiating for security. She hopes that if she loves perfectly enough, she'll finally become impossible to leave. But love has never worked that way. No amount of overgiving can replace mutual willingness. No amount of understanding can force emotional availability. No amount of patience can make another person choose what they are not ready to choose. That realization feels heavy at first. Then something unexpected begins happening. It feels freeing. Because if another person's choices are not yours to control, then neither are they yours to carry. And that changes everything. The moment you stop carrying what was never yours, your shoulders become lighter, your breathing becomes slower, your thoughts become quieter. Not because all the answers suddenly arrive, but because you finally stop asking yourself to solve a puzzle made from someone else's silence. There is an old habit many people mistake for love. It's the habit of constantly proving your value, being more available, more understanding, more forgiving, more accommodating, as if enough effort could guarantee enough affection. But real connection doesn't ask you to audition for a place in someone's life. It asks you to arrive as someone who already knows they belong in their own. And perhaps that's the lesson hidden inside every moment when someone pulls away. Not that you need to chase harder, not that you need to become someone else, but that life is quietly asking a question most people spend years avoiding. When someone else becomes uncertain, will you become uncertain about yourself too? For a moment, don't answer that question too quickly. Most people believe they know themselves until life removes something they hoped would stay. That is when the conversation becomes honest, not the conversation with him, the one you've been avoiding with yourself. Because when someone pulls away, you are left alone with the voice that has been quietly speaking beneath all the noise. Sometimes that voice is gentle. Sometimes it is painfully cruel. It says things you would never say to a friend. Of course he left. You always cared too much. You were never enough. You should have been prettier. You should have stayed quiet. You should have seen this coming. It is astonishing how easily the mind becomes both the wounded child and the harsh judge. One part of you is asking for comfort, another part is handing down punishment. And somewhere between those two voices, your peace disappears. But here's what almost nobody realizes. The voice inside your head isn't always telling the truth. Very often it's repeating an old story. Imagine carrying a pair of glasses you've worn since childhood. Every time you look at love, you see through the same scratched lenses. If someone is kind, you wonder how long it will last. If someone is distant, you assume you've done something wrong. If someone is inconsistent, you become even more invested. Not because inconsistency feels good, because uncertainty feels strangely familiar. The heart has a quiet tendency to mistake familiarity for safety, even when familiarity has always hurt. That is why healing can feel uncomfortable. Peace feels unfamiliar. Healthy love feels slower. Respect feels almost suspicious. When you've spent years chasing emotional highs, you begin asking yourself, why doesn't this feel exciting? Sometimes it doesn't feel exciting because your nervous system has confused chaos with chemistry. It has learned that love is supposed to feel unpredictable, that waiting is romantic, that anxiety means passion. But imagine planting a tree. Would you dig it up every morning just to check if its roots are growing? Of course not. You water it, you protect it, then you allow time to do what only time can do. Healthy relationships grow in much the same way. They don't demand constant proof. They don't survive because one person keeps pulling harder. They survive because both people keep showing up quietly, consistently, without making the other person earn basic respect. The strange part is that consistency often feels less dramatic than inconsistency. Drama creates adrenaline. Consistency creates peace. And if you've lived on emotional adrenaline for years, peace can almost feel boring. But boring is not the right word. Safe is. There is an enormous difference. Think about Emma. She spent years believing she always attracted emotionally unavailable men. At first, every relationship felt magical. Late night conversations, long messages, big promises, intense attraction. Then almost without fail, something shifted. The man became less available. Emma became more available. He stepped back. She leaned forward. He grew uncertain. She became desperate to restore what had existed before. After every heartbreak, she asked the same question. Why do I keep choosing the wrong man? It seemed like the right question, but it wasn't. The better question was much quieter. What feels familiar to me about this? That question changed everything, because she remembered something she hadn't thought about for years. Growing up, affection always felt unpredictable. Some days it was warm, other days it disappeared without explanation. As a child, she learned to become emotionally alert, to read moods, to anticipate distance, to work harder whenever love felt uncertain. She wasn't doing that because she lacked intelligence. She was surviving. The heartbreaking part was that survival had become her definition of intimacy. She wasn't choosing emotionally unavailable people on purpose. She simply recognized the emotional pattern. It felt like home, even though it never felt peaceful. This is why awareness is so powerful. You cannot change a pattern you cannot see. But the moment you see it, you begin making different choices. Not immediately, not perfectly, but consciously. And conscious choices slowly become a conscious life. Something even more surprising begins happening when you stop chasing. At first it feels terrifying. Your hands almost want to reach for your phone. Your mind invents reasons to send just one more message. You tell yourself you're only trying to communicate, you're only trying to clear up confusion, you're only trying to save something meaningful. Yet underneath all those explanations lives one simple emotion: fear. Not fear of losing him, fear of sitting with yourself. Because silence doesn't only reveal his intentions, it reveals your relationship with solitude. Many people are surrounded by others, yet deeply uncomfortable being alone with their own thoughts. The moment external distraction disappears, inner discomfort becomes impossible to ignore. That is why some relationships become emotional hiding places, not because they're healthy, because they help us avoid ourselves. When the relationship becomes uncertain, suddenly there is nowhere left to hide. That sounds painful, it can be. But it can also become one of the most healing seasons of your life, because for the first time your attention returns home. You notice things you've neglected, the hobbies that once made you lose track of time, the friendships that quietly waited while you became consumed by one person's attention, the dreams you postponed because romance seemed more urgent, the version of yourself that slowly disappeared while trying to become everything someone else might want. It's amazing how gradually self-abandonment happens. No dramatic announcement, no single decision, just tiny compromises. You stop speaking honestly to avoid conflict. You stop asking for what you need because you don't want to seem demanding. You laugh at things that actually hurt. You accept inconsistency because you're afraid standards will push people away. Each compromise feels small. Together they become a life where you no longer recognize yourself. One day you wake up asking why you feel empty. The answer isn't that someone else took your happiness. It's that you've been giving away pieces of yourself one quiet moment at a time. Here's something worth remembering. The strongest women are not those who never feel anxious. They are the ones who notice anxiety without allowing it to become their leader. There is a profound difference. Emotions deserve compassion. They should not automatically receive authority. Imagine sitting beside a river. Leaves float past on the water. Some are beautiful, some are damaged, some disappear almost immediately. Your thoughts work the same way. Not every thought deserves to become a belief. Not every fear deserves to become a decision. Just because your mind whispers, he's losing interest, doesn't make it reality. Just because your heart says, you're going to be alone forever, doesn't make it prophecy. Thoughts are visitors. Character is what decides which ones are invited to stay. The woman who remains high value is not the woman who never doubts herself. She is the woman who refuses to build her identity on temporary emotions. That distinction changes relationships forever. Because confidence isn't loud. Confidence is quiet. It doesn't demand reassurance every hour. It doesn't collapse because someone else's feelings become uncertain. It listens. It observes. It waits before reacting. There is incredible strength in the pause between emotion and action. Most people never discover it. They feel something, then immediately respond. A message arrives, or doesn't. A plan changes. A tone feels different. Within seconds, they're creating stories, making decisions, defending themselves against dangers that may not even exist. But imagine standing in front of a still lake. When the surface is disturbed, your reflection becomes impossible to see. Only when the water becomes calm does clarity return. The same is true inside your heart. Reaction creates distortion. Stillness creates vision. Perhaps that is why wisdom rarely shouts. It waits. It watches. It allows truth enough time to reveal itself, and truth always reveals itself, eventually. People can maintain an image for weeks, sometimes months. Very few can maintain a false character forever. That is why patience protects you. It allows actions to become louder than words. It allows patterns to become impossible to ignore. Most importantly, it allows you to stop falling in love with possibilities. Possibility is beautiful. Reality is where relationships actually live. Another woman, Sarah, learned this in a way she never expected. She met someone who seemed almost perfect. He knew exactly what to say. He spoke about the future. He admired everything about her. She felt chosen. For months, she ignored little moments that didn't quite make sense. Promises that quietly disappeared. Plans that always changed. Affection that depended on his convenience. She explained everything away. He has a stressful job. He's just overwhelmed. He'll be different once life settles down. Then one evening, after another cancelled plan, she felt something unusual, not anger, not sadness, clarity. For the first time, she stopped asking why he kept disappointing her. Instead, she asked herself why she kept explaining disappointment away. That single question marked the beginning of a completely different life. Because she realized something simple: acceptance and tolerance are not the same thing. You can accept who someone is without tolerating treatment that slowly diminishes your peace. That realization doesn't make you cold, it makes you honest. There is compassion in understanding another person's struggles. But compassion should never require abandoning yourself. Real love leaves room for empathy. It also leaves room for boundaries. Without boundaries, kindness quietly turns into self-neglect. Without self-respect, love becomes exhaustion wearing a beautiful disguise. Perhaps you've noticed something while listening. This conversation has become less about the man who pulled away and more about the woman who remained. That is not an accident, because while his distance may have started the story, your relationship with yourself determines how the story ends. And there is one truth still waiting beneath everything we've explored, a truth that changes the way you see rejection, attraction, and even love itself. Most people spend their lives trying to be chosen. Very few ever ask whether they are choosing wisely. And that question opens a door most people never have the courage to walk through. There comes a moment in almost every woman's life when she realizes she has been asking the wrong question. Not because she isn't intelligent, not because she isn't loving, but because pain has a way of narrowing our vision until only one thing seems to matter. How do I make him come back? It feels like the most important question in the world. Until one quiet day, another question arrives. What kind of love would ask me to leave myself behind? That question doesn't demand an immediate answer. It simply sits with you. It follows you through ordinary moments, while you're making coffee, driving home after work, folding laundry, walking through a park. And little by little, something begins to shift. You stop looking at the relationship through the lens of fear. You begin looking at it through the lens of truth. Truth has a gentle way of simplifying what anxiety tries to complicate. An anxious mind collects clues. A peaceful mind notices patterns. There is a difference. A clue is a single moment. A pattern is a repeated reality. One delayed reply means very little. Months of emotional inconsistency mean much more. One difficult week is part of life. A relationship where only one person carries the emotional weight tells a different story. When you stop chasing isolated moments and start observing patterns, confusion begins to lose its grip. You no longer feel compelled to solve every silence. You no longer mistake uncertainty for mystery. You simply pay attention. And attention is one of the greatest forms of wisdom, because wisdom does not rush. It watches, it listens, it allows time to reveal character. There is something beautifully freeing about realizing that you do not have to decide someone's intentions overnight. You only need to notice whether their actions continue to align with the kind of relationship you want. This is where many women discover a surprising kind of confidence. Not the confidence that says, "I'll never get hurt." Life doesn't make that promise. The confidence that says, "Whatever happens, I won't abandon myself." That is a different kind of strength. It is quieter, more stable. It doesn't depend on being chosen. It depends on remaining true to yourself, even when the outcome is uncertain. Imagine walking through a forest. At first, the path is easy to follow, then the trail disappears. You could panic, you could run in every direction hoping to find the way. or you could become still. Listen. Notice the sun, notice the trees. Notice what has been there all along. Many relationships feel exactly like that forest. The moment clarity disappears, panic urges you to move faster. Yet, the fastest movement is rarely the wisest one. Sometimes stillness becomes the path. Not because stillness guarantees the relationship will survive, because it allows you to remain connected to yourself while discovering whether the relationship deserves your energy. That changes everything, because the goal is no longer to avoid losing someone. The goal becomes refusing to lose yourself. There is a quiet dignity in that decision. You begin saying things you were once afraid to say. You become honest about your needs. You stop apologizing for having standards. You stop explaining away behavior that consistently leaves you feeling anxious or unseen. Not with anger, not with bitterness, simply with clarity. And clarity is incredibly attractive, not because it makes people chase you, because it allows healthy people to recognize you. Emotionally available people are not searching for someone who constantly questions her worth. They are looking for someone who can meet them with openness, honesty, and mutual respect. That doesn't mean you'll never experience disappointment again. It means disappointment will no longer define you. Think about how different your life becomes when another person's distance is no longer interpreted as proof of your inadequacy. Maybe they are overwhelmed. Maybe they are emotionally unavailable. Maybe they are uncertain. Maybe they simply are not the right partner for you. None of those possibilities require you to conclude that you are unworthy of love. That conclusion was never supported by the facts. It was supported by fear. Fear often speaks with absolute certainty. It says, you'll always be alone. No one stays. You'll never find someone like him. But fear has a terrible record for predicting the future. It only knows how to repeat the past. Hope, on the other hand, does not ignore reality. Hope simply refuses to believe that one person's decision determines the rest of your life. And isn't that true? Before you met him, your life already contained laughter, dreams, friendships, moments of peace. The relationship may have added beautiful experiences, but it did not create your ability to experience joy. That ability has always belonged to you. Sometimes heartbreak simply helps you remember where it has been hiding. One of the most beautiful transformations happens almost without notice. You stop waiting. Not because you've given up, because your life becomes too full to place on hold. You begin reading books that nourish your mind, taking walks without checking your phone every few minutes, calling the friends you've missed, learning something new, rediscovering music that makes you smile, laughing without wondering whether he would approve. At first, these seem like ordinary moments, but together they become evidence of something extraordinary. Your identity is returning. The version of you that existed before fear convinced you that your happiness depended on someone else's consistency. Ironically, this is also when your energy changes. People notice it, not because you're trying to appear mysterious, because you're no longer trying to convince anyone of your worth. You carry yourself differently. You speak differently. You listen differently. There is less urgency in your voice, less desperation in your decisions, less fear in your silence, and far more peace. Some people may come back into your life, others won't. Neither outcome determines your value. If someone returns with genuine accountability, consistent effort, and a willingness to build something healthy, you can decide whether that aligns with your standards. If they return only because they miss your attention while offering nothing different, you no longer confuse their return with your responsibility. You understand that another chance should be earned through changed behavior, not familiar promises. That understanding protects your heart without closing it. There is a profound difference between building walls and building boundaries. Walls keep everyone out. Boundaries allow the right people in while protecting what matters most. Healthy love does not ask you to choose between your heart and your self-respect. It invites both. Perhaps the greatest surprise is this: the man pulling away was never the deepest story. He was simply the event that revealed a deeper invitation to trust yourself, to listen to your intuition, to become the safest place you have ever known. Because when you become emotionally at home within yourself, relationships stop feeling like rescue missions. They become shared journeys. You stop searching for someone to complete you. You begin looking for someone who complements the life you have already built.